What is up, YouTube? Today's video is brought to you by Reddit in the sense that I was browsing Reddit and I saw this really cool concept from JamesBelton. And what this concept is 100% chance to not consume charges, Squire supported, level 31 discharge, upwards of 32 charges. And he linked this image showing how it's done, and I will go through exactly how it is done. But as most people are wondering, what does the build actually look like when played? So if we go here and look at the video, this is a very preliminary version, and he did say that he would probably have around double damage in his setup. But basically, it's kind of like Ward Loop in a sense, in a weird way, or the old school cast on crit discharge, if you remember with Fakener. Now, I did not know that Discharge actually has a 2-second cooldown that they added into the game. So the gameplay looks pretty smooth, and you just pretty much zoom around. And the way that the Discharge is casted is through Blade Vortex with the trigger on the weapon. Now, there is an interesting to note about how this actually works. And it appears that the jewel called Endless Misery, which makes Discharge have a 250 millisecond cooldown, actually overrides the trigger craft on the weapon, which is 8 seconds on the cooldown. So you can see here the damage is pretty nuts already, and this is not even close to min-max. And I just wanted to give a quick mapping demonstration that I saw because a lot of people were wondering about what the build actually looked like, but this is Divergent Discharge, and this is where all the magic happens. So let's get started and see why is this now possible. So you might be wondering, why has no one ever tried to hit 100% chance to not consume charges on Discharge before? Because it does seem extremely overpowered if you can always have all of your charges up when you discharge. Well, Sentinel League added in an Awakened Enhanced gem, and this lets you get gem quality on your active skill gems. Now, the Discharge alternate quality is Divergent, has a 10% chance to deal damage without removing charges. So what Awakened Enhanced does, or Awakened Empowered, or Awakened Enlightened, is that it gives you an extra level. So you can see here, this level is from 1 to 4. So when you corrupt this gem, you have the chance to get a level 5 Empower, Enhance, or Enlighten. And when you see how close everything adds up to be, you will see that this is actually completely necessary. And without this change, it would probably be almost impossible to reach 100%. So how exactly do you reach 100%? Well, it is a lot of math involved. So as you may know, this is going to be quite a journey to reach 100%. And props to Belton to being able to calculate everything out and realize his dream of getting a 100% chance to not consume charges on Discharge. So Discharge Helm gives you 30% chance to not consume charges. So you can see here, this is the Discharge Helm. 30% chance for Discharge to deal damage without removing charges. And Divergent Discharge needs 140% quality to give 70% chance to not consume charges. So on the Divergent Discharge, it is 10% chance to not consume charges per 20% quality. So what that means is that you need 140% quality total to get 70% chance. And then this adds up with 30% chance, and you get 100% chance to not consume charges. Now, how exactly do you reach 140% quality? Well, you use a weapon that is very niche and that gives you a lot of quality to support gems. So you can see here, you get 16% quality from the claw from the implicit. So here's 6% on the implicit and then 10% on the actual craft. So this is 16%. And then you get 23% quality from the Discharge gem, and this is by double corrupting discharges to get 2123 on Divergent Discharge. And now here's where the magic happens. You have to get your Awakened Enhanced to around level 10. And at level 10, you can see here, you get 72% quality of supported active skill gems. And the way you can get level 10 is Enlighten now can be level 5. So you have +1 from here on the implicit, 6. +1 to Socket of Dex, 7. +1 of Socket of Gems, 8. +2 to level of Socket of Support Gems, so that makes it 10. So he's able to have Awakened Enhance at level 10, which grants 72% quality. And this build does use an Ashes of the Star. As you can see here, I have to actually pull it up. On Ashes of the Star, it's not even perfectly divine, but it has 29% quality. So overall, you have the build around 16 from the Claw, 23 from the Gem, 72 for Awakened Enhance, and 29 for Ashes of the Star, which actually equals out to around 140% quality. So you can actually give it a little bit higher if you had the Ashes of the Star Perfectly Divine, and I'm not sure if this is the top roll you can possibly have on the weapon. So everything added up, all of that magic combined together allows you to reach 140% quality on Divergent Discharge, and with the helm, you get a 100% chance to not consume any charges. Now, you might be wondering, how does this build actually work? Now, there is a little bit of magic, and this is something that I never even knew existed, so props to him for discovering it. So the way that most builds work nowadays with Discharge is you pretty much discharge once, you wait the 2-second cooldown, and then you're able to do it again. And then there's also the cast on death discharge build where people just blow themselves up, die, and then one-shot the boss. Well, this is a little bit different. So Discharge now has a 2-second cooldown. Endless Misery, which is a threshold jewel for Discharge, gives you Discharge at a 250 millisecond cooldown. Now, the 250 millisecond cooldown does come with some downsides in that you get 60% less area of effect, and you also do 60% less damage. However, the 250 millisecond cooldown bypasses the trigger cooldown. So you can see here the trigger on the claw has 8-second cooldown. Trigger a socket spell when you use a skill of an 8-second cooldown. Now, because of the way this thing is worded, in that it says discharge cooldown is 250 ms, and this wording is very important in how it says is. It means that no matter what, the discharge cooldown will always be 250 ms. So if you put it in the trigger weapon, it bypasses the 8-second cooldown. So you will always be triggering at 250 milliseconds as long as you're casting a spell every 250 milliseconds. So this is kind of like Resolute Technique. If you take Resolute Technique on the tree, for instance, let's go see here. It says you never deal critical strikes. So even if you have all of the crit nodes on the tree, you will still never deal critical strikes if you have Resolute Technique. Now, where do the charges actually come from the build? Well, you get the Frenzy Endurance charges from Replica Pharaoh's Fur, and with the right duration with Aspect of the Cat and not having any reservation, you can pretty much maintain maximum Frenzy and Endurance charges at all times. Now, for the power charges, you're able to generate it. I think he actually uses Divergent power charge on crit because it actually happens to be the best, the best skill gem. So right here, you have power charge on crit, and then the Assassin's Ascendancy also is able to give a power charge every time you crit, so 20%, 10% chance to gain a power charge on crit. And this node is pretty good in the sense that it also gives you +1 maximum power charge. Now, how does he actually proc the discharge? Well, he uses Blade Vortex, and the Blade Vortex, every time it hits, it's able to cast it, so he's able to cast Blade Vortex, and then this will cause the trigger to proc at the 250 milliseconds from the Endless Misery. So this is how the discharge is always being proc, because the Blade Vortex hits the enemy, so he's able to just zoom around the map, cast Blade Vortex, have it discharge, and do a lot of damage. So all of this combined together makes this build kind of like a ward loop of a build, but not quite. It's almost like old school cast on crit discharge, and that the discharge comes out pretty fast, although it's not as crazy as the old trigger rate from before. So it makes a pretty fun playstyle, and I do think that it's a really cool build that could get picked up more if it's actually really strong. But I think the main problem is that the weapon is pretty niche, and it does require a lot of shenanigans to make it all come together. Now, what do I actually think about this build? I do think that this is a very, very interesting interaction between Endless Misery and Trigger, and it's pretty much the same where you learn something new about PoE every single day. Now, the potential DPS of this build is probably extremely, extremely, extremely high in the sense that you're able to stack quad multi-jewels. Because Discharge, you're able to get Fire, Cold, and Lightning tagged. So it's going to have the ability to get jewels that have literally 60% multi on them. This build kind of reminds me of the old school cast on crit discharge with Vol's Devotion, where people use the Vol's Devotion to generate endurance charges at the same time. Now, you could also play this build as self-cast discharge and focus on the cooldown recovery. Now, you would have to get cooldown recovery because the 2-second cooldown is available on discharge, so you can't really bypass that without lowering the cooldown, and it's not really confirmed whether all of the cooldown recovery is worth it over Endless Misery, and having a self-cast with Endless Misery does feel a lot better. Now, Discharge used to not have a cooldown before, and they added in 3.12. Not really sure why they did that. Maybe they wanted to what's it called, nerf cast on crit discharge. I don't really remember what exactly happened back in 3.12. Oh, this is supposed to be 3.12. But basically, if you're kind of wondering about how much damage this build does, so right now his build's not really min-max, but this is his PoB. So the PoB, I put 12 power charges, 8 frenzy, 8 endurance, and you're able to get a lot of charges through these rings. So you can see here this ring has +1 maximum endurance, 1 maximum power, and you can eventually get 2 maximum power, 1 maximum endurance, and 1 maximum frenzy on both rings. It would just take a lot of luck with recombining. Now, you see here, if you have all of the power charges, it gives them around 4.4 million average hit. So you can take the 4.4 million and multiply it by 4, which is around 16 million DPS if it's triggering at its maximum potential, which is 4 times a second. Now, his crit multi is probably pretty low. Like, you could probably change up the tree, make it a little bit more efficient, use like 3 1 passive point voices or 2 1 passive point voices, and you would have like what? A lot more multi. So you probably have around 800 multi. So that alone already puts this at like 8 to 10 mil average hit times 4, 40 mil DPS, which is not bad. It's not like the craziest thing in the world, but it is very respectable damage. And this doesn't even really account for, oh, it's not a boss, but well, it'll be interesting to see how much you can actually get this up to. The shock effect should be really high with how big the hit actually is. So you can see here the discharge actual damage is pretty high in terms of how much it hits for. And I don't think this build really has that much pen attached to it. So it does have elemental penetration gem in, and his discharge is not 21 either, which should add a good chunk of damage. So overall, the build should have very, very high damage potential once you min-max it. Very, very cool, interesting concept. And I know a lot of people was asking me on stream about how you actually reach 100% and what the build actually looked like. So I just want to do a quick little video shouting out JamesBelton about this interesting concept and how Endless Misery actually interacts with Trigger. Let me know down in the comments below if you actually knew this interaction existed in the past. And I hope you find more mirrors, exalts, and mage bloods than me. And see you next time. Bye.